with me, Karen Kowal, will be co-presenting this afternoon, and this is for the new project application webinar. Sorry, here we go. So all lines have been muted, and we're going to try to keep it that way throughout the presentation, but we are going to have time at the end for question and answer. At that time, you can either raise your hand and we can unmute you to ask your question, or you can use the question chat box in the right-hand side of the menu. However, if you're having any audio or visual issues, please don't wait till the end to tell us. Raise your hand sooner so that we can try to make sure we correct that before moving forward. And then we also want to draw your attention to the right-hand side of your screen where you should be able to see one handout. That's a PDF version of the PowerPoint that we're going to be going through, so feel free to download that handout as well. And then last but not least, we are recording the webinar, so if you want to go back and listen to it later, we'll make sure that you get the recorded version after the webinar. We'll probably be able to send that out to you tomorrow morning. So again, just a little bit of a welcome. You've probably interacted with a lot of the members from our CoC team already, but just as a reminder, Dave Thomas is our Vice President of Community Partnerships. Karen Kowal is the Director of Programs, and then you may have interacted with Elizabeth Perez, the other Program Manager, or myself as the Program Manager here at All Chicago. So for today's presentation, we want to accomplish a few learning objectives. You want to understand the context around the new project application and the CoC competition process, some introduction or potentially reminders to the HUD Exchange resources and resources needed to complete the new project application, and to, last but not least, understand how to complete the new project application for fiscal year 2017, the HUD CoC competition. It's important to note that the slides that we've put together have been tailored for the majority of the audience, which are already CoC funded partners. So we apologize, but have been reaching out to those projects that are much newer to the CoC funding, and so some of this will be a reminder if you attended the in-person training or webinar for the renewal project application. So as a reminder, the general process is that we have agencies complete project applications for all HUD-funded renewal projects and new projects. The renewal project deadline was today at noon. So we have all of those submitted, and we're going to be doing final reviews so that we can ensure that this is submitted next week. And then you guys have a very quick turnaround for the new project application process. In the middle there, you're seeing that the collaborative applicant, which is All Chicago, collects and reviews all the applications. And in addition to that, we complete a large CoC application in addition to that. And then lastly, there's the all project applications and the CoC application are submitted as one consolidated application to HUD, and that deadline is later in September. And so what you're seeing here on the next important process note is project applications are due in eSNAP 30 days prior to the deadline, and that's why we just have this shorter turnaround time, because the final consolidated application is due September 28th. We haven't heard, as far as I know right now, of other conditional funding announcements, but HUD is able to basically make some adjustments all up until that final date. But for right now, I think we're on track. So we just want to review deadlines that are most important to you as a new project. Tuesday, August 22nd by noon is when we would like to see the first draft of your new project application. This is different from the renewal project application. We're not going to have you submit this through Survey Gizmo. We would like that you just submit this to us as a PDF to the CoC programs at allchicago.org email address. And then for those that are a new HUD applicant, we also would want your applicant profile via email, or if you're a renewal project and there's been changes since you submitted your renewal project application today because of your new project, we would take a look at that applicant profile again. And if you have questions, feel free to let us know which bucket you fall into. We will then start to review them Tuesday afternoon and make sure by the 23rd that we're getting any feedback back to you, so that you can make any last minute edits, so that there's a final draft submitted in eSnaps on August 24th by noon. And again, as we just went through, this timeline has been established based on the HUD requirements, so we're looking at not really being able to provide any extensions for these deadlines. And so again, we really appreciate that you guys were able to join us today on this webinar and have been really understanding to these quick turnaround deadlines. So we're just going to go over some of the HUD resources. We've been sending these out to you over the past couple of weeks, so hopefully this isn't new to the people on here, but if they are, that's okay too. What we want to point your direction to is on the HUD Exchange, there's a ask a question option, and we use this portal quite frequently to ask any like technical issues or questions that we just aren't able to answer through the instructional guides or the detailed guides. If because of the short turnaround time, we are hoping that there aren't a lot of questions that have to be submitted, but it only makes us say, like, please start your new project applications as soon as you're able to. You also, sorry, we just got one question. It was asked whether or not the PDF handout will be available, and that's the PDF of the slides are on the right-hand side of your screen in the handouts that you can download. Sorry, so what I was also going to say is if for some reason you get locked out of eSnaps, this is also the way that you have to go back in to get your username and password figured out. You can also find instructional guides here, and we have those posted on our website as well. And you can look through frequently asked questions if that's something that you find useful. This next slide here is about our eSnaps resources. So most importantly, this is the link to where you should go to find some of the project application resources and make sure that you have the login link to log in to eSnaps. And then as I mentioned before, there's a link on here to our website. Right now on your screen, you're seeing a lot of like the renewal project applications. The new project application instructional guide and detailed instructional guide should be up there today as well. And then lastly here for resources, we have just a brief chart. Sometimes it's confusing about what All Chicago can help with versus what you might have to use the HUD Exchange or eSnaps technical problems. So we just have a quick chart here. If you're having technical problems, if you're locked out, or you're just having a lot of just like entry issues into eSnaps, we would suggest that you use the HUD Exchange or the help desk. However, for All Chicago, please reach out to us if you're struggling with like budget amounts or understanding policies. Don't worry about accessing problems in Survey Gizmo because that's not going to apply to you guys. But feel free to just send other questions to us about deadlines and stuff like that. And then on the bottom of that slide, you can see our email address as well. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and go into the new project application steps. And for those that have done the renewal project application, this is going to look similar. The same 4 steps are appropriate for the new project application. So you must start with your project applicant profile. For those that have already done this, you likely will not have to make changes to this. The second step is the funding opportunity registration. Then you'll be able to create the project application, and then the last step is accessing the application through submission. So we'll walk through each of these steps and focus more on the new project application step, of course. So we're only going to have, I think, one slide here about the applicant profile, since most of you have already done this. But there is a separate set of instructions for creating the applicant profile for those that have not done this yet. There's an instructional guide, and then there's also a guide on how to complete the HUD Form 2880, which you're new, so you're not necessarily going to know how this changed this year, but a lot of questions were received during the renewal application about this. We did want to make a note that if for some reason obtaining this new project would make you make changes to the HUD Form 2880 for your renewal project applications, that you can go ahead and update the applicant profile during this time, and we'll make sure that that's recorded on our end for your renewal projects as well. And then just please note that the applicant profile must be updated before starting the application process, and so only after you do this step, you'll be able to successfully start the project application in eSnap. So the second step after you do the applicant profile is navigating to the funding opportunity registrant's workspace, which is on the left-hand side there in red. What you will want to do is click on the little checkbox piece of paper there next to New Project Application Fiscal Year 2017. We can't stress this enough that you need to make sure that it's the new project and that it's for fiscal year 2017. Once you've selected that, you're able to click yes. You'll wait for the screen to refresh, and then you'll click back. Once you do that, you'll be able to move to the projects menu on the left-hand side, and you'll then be able to select that new project application fiscal year 2017 from the funding opportunities drop-down that you just created. Once the screen refreshes, it will appear empty, and then you'll click on that little piece of paper with the checkbox and add your project. Then you'll be able to enter the project name as you want it to appear on your grant award letter. We would encourage you to stick with the name that you submitted through the new project applications process, but this gives you the opportunity to make sure that you are putting the right name that you want to appear. And then that fourth step is you're going to go and navigate to the submissions workspace on the left-hand side. You can filter various ways to find the project that you just registered, but we suggest try searching for the new project application fiscal year 2017, filtering for all projects, specifically open projects. And then you can look for those that don't have a submission date next to it on the right. But using the filter to find the project is helpful for some of you that have multiple projects that are going to be showing up there. So once you're able to select the project that you just created, this is going to look similar to the renewal project application, that there's still 8 parts. Most of part 1 is a lot of the pre-populated forms from the applicant profile, so you'll be doing a lot of confirming and moving on, but there are certain points in here that you have to complete in order for some of the next sections to populate. So that was section 1, and now parts 2 through 8 are also similar with recipient information, project information, all the way down to your budget information and submission summary. So I know we're moving through this a little quickly, but please feel free to add any questions that you have on the right hand side, and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. We also wanted to draw your attention into part 1 to make sure that you're selecting the state of Illinois, and also make sure that when you're entering congressional districts, that you're entering them for which you believe this project will be operating in. And then for field field 17, you want to make sure that the project's operating start and end dates are reflected as calendar year 2018 through calendar year 2019. Okay. These are some additional tips as well, just to make sure that for question 19, you're selecting B, and then your agency specifically will answer yes or no to question 20. And then again, there are for 1G through H and J, there's just a lot of certification and confirming that everything is pulling in and populating correctly from the applicant profile, and making sure that you're clicking on the certification that is accurate. If there are things that are not accurate, you might see that you're unable to make the edits in this screen, and you'll have to navigate back to your applicant profile to make those changes. So in part 2, you will fill out the recipient or subrecipient information. If your agency plans to receive the funds and then re-grant the funds, this would apply to you. However, the majority of you are not doing this. So if you are and you have questions, please reach out to us if you have any questions. All right, so this is pretty new for the new project application in comparison to the renewal project application. Part 2B talks about the experience of the applicant and any other partners. So there's 4 narrative questions that have to be answered. The first one here is describing the experience of the applicant and any of the potential subrecipients, and effectively utilizing federal funds and performing the activities proposed in the application, giving the funding and the time limitations. The second narrative question is going to describe the experience in leveraging other funds, such as federal, state, local, and private sector funds. These narrative sections likely have a limit, a character limit, so please be mindful of that before writing out a super long narrative. And then the last 2 questions here is for question 3 is to describe the basic organization and management structure of the applicant and include any evidence of internal and external coordination and an adequate financial accounting system. The last question gets at any unresolved monitoring or audit findings, and then if that is a yes, you will be prompted to ask some additional follow-up questions. Okay, I think I'm handing it over to Karen.
Great. Let's get to the meat of this application. So similarly to the renewal applications, part 3A is the project detail. So this is where you're filling out, you're selecting the right CoC name and number. Remember, pick Illinois 510, because if you pick a different one and submit, then we're going to have to hunt it down in suburban Cook or Peoria or wherever you sent it to. So make sure you have 510. And then All Chicago is the CoC applicant name. That should pop up automatically once you pick Illinois 510. Your status is standard, and then your component type. So make sure you're picking either joint, TH, and PH, rapid rehousing, HMIS, or permanent housing. Because as Renee mentioned before, what you pick here in the component part will affect other fields that come up later, and you'll see that in this presentation. And then for Title V, the vast majority of you should be answering no to that question. If you're unsure, please look at the detailed instructions. So we did divide this up so we're covering all of the components. So at times we'll be discussing things that don't relate to your component. So please just bear with us. But we want to make sure everyone has as much information as they need to do the project, their new project application as quickly as possible. So the first part is for HMIS, and HMIS does of course have its own kind of descriptions and things it needs to do. So they're going to work on scope, they're going to work on the schedule of activities, which is pretty similar to what everyone does. The participation and coordinated entry question, they'll have an answer to that. And then the development activities, and then they're on to the next one. So you know, for our housing programs, this is a lot more robust. So the project description, this is where HUD as a new project really wants you to write about how you're going to get to full operational capacity and demonstrate how what's going to be achieved over time. So this is where you're doing your scope, you're doing the need, you're doing the target population. The project plan here is very important as well. So if you're doing rapid rehousing, for example, part of what they want to hear is how long you anticipate people will be in rapid rehousing. So if you're doing a joint program, they want to know how long people will be in transitional housing and then how long they'll be in rapid rehousing. Make sure you think about those elements with your project plan and refer to the detailed instructions for your particular component type. Of course, they want to know about outcomes and linkages, and really they want you to understand how you're going to get to full operational capacity and how long you think that's going to take. Of course, they want to know why you need HUD dollars. Some things are actually referenced later, so if you're worried about your character limit, because there is one and it's never enough, just make sure that you are, some things you could also refer to elsewhere, like supportive services. Sometimes we just mention them briefly and then you can go more in depth about your services that are offered by you as the applicant versus your partners and things like that. So again, here they want to see how many beds you're adding in units to make sure that matches throughout your application. And for the joint programs, make sure your TH beds are matching throughout and your rapid rehousing beds are matching throughout. So on to the next, this is still similar for all parts of the component. They want to know the schedule for the proposed activity. So this is really a plan. So if you might not, we don't have to do this in the renewal application, so it's a little bit of a different question. So again, demonstrating how you're going to get to full capacity, because that's what HUD is really interested in. For question 3, whether you're participating in coordinated entry, everybody should be putting yes, because everybody in our system participates in coordinated entry. 4 is our favorite special population focus. So if you have a special population, check which population it is. And they want to know things about your special capacity, your design, your tools, your outreach. And this should have already been highlighted in your descriptive question, your description in question 1. We wanted to note that all new permanent supportive housing projects need to check chronically homeless as their special population, because that's part of the guidance in the NOFA. The next question, question 5, is about housing first. So just like everybody uses coordinated entry, everyone in our system is housing first. So you should be answering all of those questions so that when you get to D, it's going to say, will this project follow a housing first approach? And it should be yes. So basically, you should be checking the first 4 boxes in B and then the first 4 boxes in C, and then getting to a yes answer at the bottom. So in true HUD form, the numbers of the questions vary a little bit by component type. We didn't want to give the numbers, but these are the next 3 questions. So they want you to describe your development activities, so how you're I think it's leveraging funds. Sorry, I lost my notes for a second. The second one is, our clients going to be required to live in a particular structure? So this is kind of why they need to live in a project, and why is that important for that community? And then will more than 16 people be living in one structure? So this is kind of your justification if you're doing a project-based program, why do they have to all live together? So these questions will be available for every component except for HMIS. Question 10 is only for permanent housing, and this is where you select whether you're doing permanent supportive or rapid rehousing. And as you all hopefully know already by now, that the board passed a motion yesterday where all new and turnover permanent supportive housing units need to be dedicated plus. So after you check PSH, make sure you're checking dedicated plus as well. Part 3 is about expansion. So this is new and exciting. Expansion is available for any permanent housing program as well as HMIS. So this year, HUD is offering programs the option, instead of having another new program and a new grant, what you can do is you can actually attach this new project to one of your old grant numbers. So the one caveat is this, is that your new project has to be the exact same model as the one that you're linking it to. So, for example, all of our joint programs cannot choose expansion because there's no other joint program there. Even though some of them run transitional housing, you cannot link in that way. So the question one is, are you using existing facility? That's a question for everyone. Question two is whether you're going to expand. Is it the same? Is the project expansion of the same component? And this is where, if you click yes, it's going to ask for your grant number. So this is where you put the exact grant number of your existing program in, so you can link it back to that one. The next question that it's going to ask is, what kind of activities are you expanding on? So this is another new aspect. So as you can see on the slide, there's like 4 or 5 different, there's actually only 4 ones you can choose. You're increasing the number of homeless persons served, provide additional supportive services to homeless persons, bring existing facilities up to state and local health and safety standards, and replace the loss of unrenewable funding, private, federal, or other, but not including state or local government funding. So if any of these you pick and move down into the selected items, it's going to populate additional questions. So for example, for the increase in number of homeless persons served, it's going to ask you, for your current project, when you're at, max capacity, how many people are you serving? And then it's going to ask you how many additional people will you be serving by expanding. Supportive services is going to ask you, why do you need to provide additional supportive services? And you'll have a narrative question for that. So all of the information about those 4 items are on pages 51 and 52 in the detailed instructions. So HMIS can also expand. They have similar to what I just explained for permanent housing. You say that you're expanding, you put in your current renewal information, and then they would have to pick one of these 4 areas as well, and then there'll be extra questions that populate that they have to justify why they want to increase HMIS functionality or increase the participating agencies and things like that. So 4 is back to supportive services. This is standard for everyone. So here we're looking for now these are the questions that we don't have to answer anymore in our renewal projects, on how we are providing educational services for individuals and families, that this staff is going to ensure that, if someone's enrolled in school, that they'll receive education services, how you're going to take, and then you have to provide narrative of how you're going to take all these into account, describe how you're helping people obtain and remain in permanent housing, describe how they're going to increase their income or employment. So these are, questions that we all answered long ago, and now since you have a new project, you get to answer them again. 4 then goes into our chart that we had in the renewal process of what supportive services are offered in the project. We do encourage everyone to put an answer for every supportive service that's listed, whether you do it or not. But as you'll recall, there's different providers. So it could be the applicant, it could be a subrecipient, it could be a partner, it could be a non-partner, and then the frequency that your participants are going to be getting those services. And then 5 and 6, these are the same questions as in the renewal process, or if you're going to get transportation assistance, how do you get the mainstream benefits as a single form, how do you follow up, whether you're doing SOAR, things like that. So HMIS, of course, has their own questions. These are involving the HMIS data standards. So these are narrative questions they'll have to answer about how they're ensuring data standards and what steps they're taking for compliance. and they have a lot of data standard questions for HMIS, and so I'm sure if there's questions about this, the answers are in the detailed instructions. 4B is about housing type and location. So, long ago when you first applied for a new project, you had to do this, but since you're in renewal, we can't really change our bed units from renewal year to renewal year. So this is the screen where we add how many beds and units will be added. So you see the 3 boxes there. The first thing you need to do is select that add, the little paper with the plus sign, and then you are given a series of screens where you get to choose housing type, the number of beds and units, the address, the geocode, which should be Chicago, and once you click save, it'll populate onto the first screen. So, most of the questions in the detail are self-explanatory. I know people often ask about address. So what do I do if I'm doing scattered site and people are going to be all over? I mean, HUD guidance is to put an address that's, close to kind of the epicenter of where people will be, or in the center of the neighborhood where people will be. So, I mean, that's the guidance they give. If you're, going to do a project base, you need to find a location. You don't have the exact address, you can choose an address that's in the area of where you're going to be, even if it's not the exact address for later. Because, I mean, HUD does realize that some of this is fluid, especially at this point. So for just a little bit about the joint program. So the joint program is going to have to add beds and units both for TH and rapid rehousing. So you have to ensure that your totals are matching, right? And the totals, these are the totals that are going to filter into your budget later as well. So, for TH, your units may be in a single building somewhere, whereas your rapid rehousing would be scattered sites throughout the community. So for HMIS gets to answer questions about training. So, they're looking for the date, the last training or the proposed next training, and these following topics as applicable. The next part is, some of our favorite charts for housing. This is the participation and outreach information. So remember, the data in these charts is for a point in time when you're at full capacity. Don't think of this as over the year. So when you're full, how is your population going to look? There's some color coding in that. So if it's dark gray, you don't have to fill anything in. If it's a light gray, it's going to auto-calculate from above. And a note that chronic substance abuse or use may constitute a disability. So the 5A chart is the project participants, the households. So here you want to make sure that your household match to how many you have. It has to be the number, it matches to the units that you had. And then the project participants, these are all the subpopulations. So if you're doing families, you need to have at least one person for every household in these subpopulations. But some people, as you know, have various, they qualify under various disabilities or various categories in the 5B chart. So often, most projects actually have a number that's greater than their number of participants in 5B. And there are often challenges with this. So if you have any questions about these charts, feel free to contact us. This is the graphic that HUD's providing to have a better understanding of this chart. So you see this nice little blue family here. So this is one household, and this has one adult, and it has at least one adult and one child. The adult is between 18 and 24, and then there's 2 children, and that's what you would enter in 5A. So in 5B, we get into what are all the other sub descriptors of this family. So as you can see, the one adult is under 3 different categories. They're a chronically homeless vet, they have a chronic substance abuse disorder, they're a victim of DB, right? And the children, they fall into 2 categories. They're chronically homeless and they have a developmental disability. So in the 5B chart, our number goes way higher than 3. You know, it's going to be about 7. So the next chart is participation and outreach information. So this is very similar to the chart in the renewal process. Again, you have to make sure that all of your percentages equal 100%. If they don't equal 100%, you won't be able to move on. The one thing that's a little bit different is that Dedicated Plus changes some of these entries. So if they look unfamiliar to you, it might be because you didn't have a Dedicated Plus program before. For the joint TH and PH rapid rehousing component, you have different choices than these, and they're choices that would qualify someone for a transitional housing program. So make sure you're mindful of what those options are and that your percentage is accurate. And then in question 2, you're describing the outreach plan for homeless participants. I mean, since all of you are participating in coordinated entry, a lot of the outreach happens through coordinated entry, and you should put that in your narrative, but you should also put how you are reaching out to these to participants from these different areas as well. So we're getting to the budget information. So first, we're selecting the relevant budgets on the funding request screen. So what you select will repopulate into the budget screens further on. I'm just going to move to the next slide quickly and come back up to this one. So what we did is we did a little kind of table so you knew which costs were eligible under which component type. So as you can see, for permanent supportive housing, they can pick any component type, whereas for rapid rehousing, you can only pick rental assistance, supportive services, and HMIS. The joint program gets a little more detailed in that for the TH portion of that component, you can only pick certain costs, and for the rapid rehousing, you can only pick certain other costs. So please be mindful of that when you're doing your budget. Just to go back up to the previous slide. So the other part of this is going to be whether you're
Yeah, I can help with this one. So you'll just want to make sure that when you're filling out your budget, there's going to be a question about whether or not your proposed funding is from reallocation or the bonus project dollars. So I believe in the email that Dave sent out, he would have told you which one you were. So make sure that's selected. And then there's a note from HUD that says about they'll basically look at the amounts that we're putting in for reallocation to make sure that we're not putting in more reallocation dollars than we actually reallocated. So if somebody accidentally does more than we did through the renewal process, they would adjust that budget. So it's just making sure that we're marking them appropriately so they know if it's reallocation versus bonus.
Great, thanks, Renee.
Yeah.
And of course, our metro area for fair market rent is Chicago. So if you're doing rental assistance, you're going to have pre-populated rent amounts. So as we mentioned, the budgets are unique for each component type, and we're just in the detailed instructions from HUD, we're listing where your budget information is located based on your model type. But as always, you can call us if you need some assistance with completing your budget. You know, a big part of the budget is, of course, match. Match funds are, you know, all projects have to have match. They want to know what your current commitments are at the time of the application, but knowing sometimes those things change. So you all had those when you did your project applications to us, so hopefully those did not change. You know, match can be cash or in kind or a combination of both, so make sure you're taking that into account when you're doing it. You know, match, it has to be equal to or greater than 25% of the total request. this including the admin, but excluding leasing. So you don't include any leasing costs when you're calculating how much your 25% of match will be. Again, there's always a ton of FAQs about this, and we put the link at the bottom for you to ensure that you're doing your match correctly. And this is just a sample budget. This is what's going to, summary budget, this is what's going to pre-populate at the end for you to see, you know, what your budget looks like. You know, I always recommend that everyone go for the 10% of admin from HUD. So that's one thing to look at as well. I did want to note about HMIS. I know when you did your project applications to us, we had you put in, you know, $160 per data entry user for HMIS, and we hope that you will put that into your final budget as well. And as a lot of you know, when you do your initial budget, that's the time to really try to get things right for what you're spending. So if you think there's additional costs, like for HMIS, and if you can adjust your budget slightly to accommodate those, I would recommend that you do that. You know, some larger agencies might have someone who does their reporting for HMIS or entry for HMIS, and that's not a direct service provider. So those are just things to think about. So now we're getting to the home stretch here. So part 7 are the attachments and certifications. Most of you won't have any required attachments. If you have subrecipients, you will. The attachment is the 501c3 for that subrecipient. You need to certify that you're complying with all of the laws outlined in the NOFA as a checkbox. And then you have your submission summary. So this is the big long list with checks if you've completed things and X's if things aren't quite right. And then you can, of course, click on one section and go back to where you were. You know, the last screen of the submission summary, this is where you can export to the PDF to send to us. So you should have that box at the bottom. If you do accidentally submit, just let us know and we can re-release it to you. And so then we're to the steps to all Chicago, as we mentioned before. We want you to complete the profile if you need to. The vast majority of you should not have to do anything to your applicant profile. Do your project application and make a PDF of it and submit it to us at the CoC programs address. These are all due to us by Tuesday, August 22nd at noon, and then we're going to review those. We hope to, you know, we know the timeline is short, and Renee and I will be the ones reviewing all these applications, so we're going to get feedback to you by Wednesday so that you can hopefully turn around right away and make those corrections and do your final submission. So we do want everything to be submitted in eSnaps by Thursday, August 24th by noon. You know, I feel we have, you know, all of our agencies, most of our agencies are experienced. You've all done the renewal project application process, so you're well versed in how everything is working. So, you know, outside of the, you know, heavy narrative parts of having a new project application, I think like the technical parts of it are going to go really smoothly for all of you. You know, we do have some additional resources. HUD has blank templates of all the applications. So if you want to see a paper version or how it looks coming out of eSnaps, that's where you can get that. They also have very detailed instructional guides for new projects. It's geared towards someone who's never had a project with HUD before, so it's very detailed, and it is a really good source for answering your questions. And again, feel free to contact us with any questions you might have. And the last slide is just a recap of the deadline. And with that, I think we can take some questions.
Great. We have received some, so I'm glad we have some time here to go through them. As a reminder, if you're able to use the chat or question function on the right-hand side of your screen, that's the preferred way to answer these questions, but you can also raise your hand and we can unmute you to talk to us as well. So the first question we have is if we already submitted the applicant profile in HUD Form 2880 for a renewal project, do we need to update it even more for the new project?
I would say most likely not, because I think most of our agencies already have over $200,000 in HUD funding. The only reason you would amend it is if this project is bringing in some additional resources that you would put in, table 2 or 3 on the 2880. That would be the only reason I can see that you would want to make any adjustments to that.
Great. The next question is, what month should we use for the start and end date? The application process asked us to be ready to start in January.
Yeah, I mean, we want to make sure projects are ready as soon as possible, but you need to put in a date that's reasonable for you and for when you want to start. I mean, it really is up to you. I mean, one of the questions on the application is, will you be ready to start before like September, is it 30th, 2018, I think. So, that's the guidance I would give. I mean, the sooner the better is always good, but you should make it what's best for your agency and what works best for you to get the project implemented. But you do have to start in 2018.
All right. The next question is, can the narrative section be pulled from our new project application submitted earlier to the CoC? If you're referring to like what you submitted via Survey Gizmo, yes, just please send us an email, and we can get that back out to you if you don't have a copy of it.
But I mean, if you're asking if you can import things from other projects into the new project application, the answer to that would be no. So if you want something that you can just copy and paste into, we can send you a PDF of your other applications, but you can't import from a renewal project into a new project.
The next question is there a way to find out the character limit before answering a question? That's a good question. When I was reading through the detailed instructions, I didn't see that, but we could look at the templates quick and try to get back to you as we're going through some of these questions. Are there expectations about how fast a program should become fully operational? I don't recall having expectations. I think HUD wants to just have a plan and they want it to be reasonable. With coordinated entry, that's going to dictate how quickly some of you can be at full capacity. But since we're adding so many units for the chronically homeless, I think that shouldn't be a problem. We can look at and see if there's any guidance about that. And we'll look back at the detailed instructions. The detailed instructions may have something in there. Okay. The next question is, can you link projects if they have different populations? For example, our current PSH program is for single adults and our new one is for homeless families.
So I actually looked that up in preparation for this webinar, and I didn't see anything in the detailed instructions or the guidance in the note for this said you cannot do that. So it looks like you can link a new family project to an old individual project. You just have to make sure that your beds and units and your narrative reflect working with families. I mean, I didn't see anything that would not let you do that.
Okay, the next question is, for the participant characteristics, since we'll be recruiting new families and don't know yet about substance use, DV, etc., what is your advice about how to answer those questions?
I mean, I would look at, your current projects and what the demographics are in those projects and just make your best educated guess. I mean, that's really all you can do with those questions on the project application. I mean, if you focus and you specialize in a specific population like HIV, I mean, that's easy. Or if you have done chronic homeless programs that with the disability, you can have a feel for what the percentages are. So you just want to do your best estimate.
All right. The next question is, we weren't allowed to charge the HUD grant for the HMIS licensing costs in the initial application. It had to be from matched funds instead. Are you saying that we can now include HMIS in the HUD budget?
So are you saying when you did your application to All Chicago for the new project portion? I mean, licenses are an allowable cost under HUD for HMIS. So if you want to include HMIS licenses in your HUD budget, you should do that. Since I wasn't here when the new project application came, I don't know if you wanted us to do that out of, if we told you to do that out of match. I just don't know the history, so I'm sorry, I don't know that answer.
There was a follow-up that said yes, the budget template to All Chicago specified that it was from matched funds.
We'll check with Dave on that and we'll get back to you. Hang on.
Okay, the next question is, we launched a bonus project in 2013. The project model is the same as this new project. It sounds like we can attach this new project to that grant during this process. Is that correct? That is, rather than having yet another grant contract, we would just have one contract between the 2013 project and this project.
Yes. So what happens is you do link it to your old grant number, and then we do rank all the projects, even the new projects. So assuming the project you're linking it to will be funded, then your new project will be funded as well. Then when HUD issues the grant, the contract, the grant number will be the same. It will be one grant, so you don't have to have two grants like two grant numbers like you had in the past. I think with the question of what your start and end dates will be, if you are expanding, my advice would be to have your start and end dates be the same as your grant that you're linking it to.
If you have any further questions, please feel free to submit those to us. It looks like at this time we've gone through all of the questions. Karen, I'm not sure if you were able to find anything on the character limit.
I was not able to find anything on the character limit.
Okay. So if anyone else has any further questions, feel free to submit those or go ahead and raise your hand. We were unsure how much time we were needing for this, so we gave ourselves an extra 30 minutes, but we may not need to do that. Okay, it seems that there might be another question. What it says is, it seems that in previous years, supportive service dollars could only be applied to case management. However, it seems this has changed. Can supportive service dollars now be used for other line items within support services? Yeah, I think there's the allowable costs, like interim rule that we had in the budget for the new project application, which lists out all of the allowable costs. We can make sure that that's posted or sent out as well if there's still questions about what the support service dollars can cover.
Yeah, I was just trying to think of why I don't, every year in the NOFA they change things, and was there a time when case management was the only allowable cost? Yes, but for sure there's different allowable costs in the interim rule, and the budget, the detailed instructions will take you to those. But we can check with Dave. I just don't know if there's some continuum reason why we would only want people to do case management. I haven't heard of one, but we'll check with him, and if I'm telling you the wrong thing, we'll email you, Dave.
Okay, we'll wait a couple more minutes to see if anyone's typing a question. Otherwise, we will end the webinar and send you well wishes to get started on your new project application. Well wishes. I don't even unmute anyone. No one has their hand raised. So, great. Well, we're going to go ahead then and end the broadcast, but we appreciate you guys taking the time and being flexible to the deadlines. Please feel free to continue to reach out to us, and we'll continue to look up some of those questions that we were unable to answer during the webinar. So thank you all, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. Good luck. Happy writing.